Well, for more on Trump's visit and relations between Japan and the United States, I'm joined by Hikaru Yamagishi. She is in New York. She's a PhD candidate at Yale University's Department of Political Science. Thanks very much for joining us. I want to pick up on some of those things Terrence just talked about. Before flying home, President Trump did say that the Japanese-United States bond had never been stronger, but a lot of analysts are pointing out some relatively stark contrast. And for example, on the issue of trade, let's talk about that. Your thoughts on how that really played out over the 4 days.
So the first thought here is that the people who are actually negotiating trade between the U.S. and Japan are the chief negotiators, Lighthizer and Motegi. This was always supposed to be a ceremonial visit, but as we might have expected, with the president's way of communicating and the prime minister's upcoming election, a lot of the rhetoric was focused on the strides they were making, getting closer to a friendlier, and they kept repeating a win-win situation for both countries. Trump took the prime minister by surprise by saying that there will be a big announcement, a very favorable big announcement in August, to which right after that, Prime Minister Abe was asked if he agreed, and he said, "Yes, we agreed to make a more accelerated steps toward an agreement in August."
Yeah,
so not much. Yeah,
it's interesting because it's not the first leader that Donald Trump has caught off guard, and he used a now familiar line pointing out that Japan has a large trade imbalance with the United States. Now, how closely, you mentioned that, of course, that the negotiations will be done by the people focusing on trade, but Trump is one of these larger-than-life personalities and likes to have his impressions in on that. Do you think higher tariffs on Japanese-made cars are going to be part of the landscape, and how realistic is it to have some real progress in trade?
So it seems if we look at Trump's writings early from the 80s on, one of the things that he's really grasped since the 80s up till now is the trade imbalance with Japan. Now, whether this actually will come to fruition, I can't say. I don't think we can really say. He has thrown out some numbers. He said they were negotiated on agriculture and so on, but these are just things that the president has mentioned in his speeches, and there's no real indication from either administrations that these specific measures are on the table, or there's been specific measures that have been promised.
Yeah, indeed. And Trump's remarks on the DPRK, its latest missile test that also differed with Japan and Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. What do you make of that?
So Prime Minister Abe and his administration really rolled out the red carpet. They wanted to show with what's been called sumo diplomacy, izakaya diplomacy, double cheeseburger diplomacy. They really wanted to show that the prime minister was a great friend to the U.S. and we would not, because one of the biggest challenges with dealing with the president's administration has been uncertainty. The prime minister wanted to show that they are in fact good friends. They're on the same page. There's nothing to worry about, and he really has a strong hand on the sail. Now, when President Trump mentioned North Korea and how he said he was personally not bothered by the short-range missiles that North Korea had fired. Prime Minister Abe sternly countered that it was extremely regrettable and that he thought it was a violation of UN resolution, and it ended up actually highlighting a vast gap in what the Prime Minister wanted to show as being on the same page and President Trump going rogue.
Yeah, indeed, and I think that there was also, to a degree, much was made of the fact that Trump seemed distracted, especially by political events back at home. And he's breaking from a long-standing U.S. tradition that the U.S. president leaves politics at the water's edge when venturing overseas. He was tweeting, he was talking about Joe Biden, he was talking about certain measures that had been pushed through Congress. How does that play out with Japanese leaders when he seems so distracted when they are rolling out the red carpet? The first U.S. president, the first world leader to meet the new emperor.
So a lot of the president's remarks throughout the a 4-day, 3-night, quite long visit, and I'm told that he usually doesn't take a lot of time for one-on-one meetings in terms of the proportion of the day, but he took out quite a bit of time for Prime Minister Abe. Even though a lot of his remarks were very formulaic, his remarks about how special it was and what an honor it was to meet the newly enthroned emperor were kind of sounded like the formulaic remarks that had been made by many dignitaries and congratulatory messages that have been circulated. So a lot of the Japan has been these speeches showing the president to be quite polite and very honorable and showing respect. And I'm not sure if the lack of engagement or his lack of focus is really what has been transmitted to the Japanese audience.
Indeed. Hikaru Yamagishi, thank you very much. We really appreciate your insight.
Thank you.